I'm Scott Stringer, and I'm running for mayor of New York City. My climate change is going to be the biggest urban plan in America. And to achieve this goal, we can no longer measure our progress by kicking the can down the road to 2035 when we claim we're going to be 100% renewable. We actually need a plan that is going to do a number of things. First and foremost, we've got to stop citing peaker plants and dirty diesel bus garages in communities of color. That's what COVID exposed, the environmental racism of land use decisions made over generations of mayors. That ends with me. We're going to ban fossil fuel infrastructure in the city. No more pipelines, no more places where we uproot neighborhoods and we displace people because we prioritize energy companies over our citizens. Second, we're going to build a solar panel on every rooftop and an electric battery in every basement. I'm going to make sure that we go from producing 1 megawatt of solar energy per year to 25 megawatts. And we're not going to stop there. We're also going to ensure that as part of our plan, we are going to invest in an infrastructure that speaks to the green economy. Because here's our opportunity. We can retrofit all of the dirty buildings in the city. We can adopt Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's NYCHA Green Plan. That's what the future holds. And the way we do it is by creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Now, where do those jobs go and who are they for? I would argue that we can retrain and develop a talent pool in communities of color by accessing workforce development programs that I've proposed for CUNY students, make them free, give kids a retrofitting career opportunity. This is the new economy. Remember, we had the Industrial Revolution. Remember, we had a service sector economy. The next step on the road to a renewable New York City is the green economy. Well, you're looking at the streets mayor for this city because I have a plan that speaks to the aspirations of this city. And part of that aspiration is to finally understand that we have got to have decisive action when it comes to greening our buses, greening our city fleets. I will accelerate that on day one I take office. I also want to think about what the new streetscape can look like. Think about this. 80% of New York City is sidewalks and streets, but yet cars control 70% of those streets. If you take away one parking space, you could park 20 bicycles. And if you take away 3 cars, suddenly you have outdoor dining and a restaurant. That's how I want to approach how we rethink our city. So my plan is to build 35 miles per year of busways. My plan is to make sure that we have real dedicated bus lanes and bike lanes. I want to make sure that we build safely. We should look at our streets and say, how can we build safely for 8-year-olds? Because if we think like that, we're also going to build safely for 80-year-olds. And that will protect people, but it would also create healthy communities. We do not have to have a car culture that's accelerating motorists and motor vehicles. What we really should be thinking about is what the post-Robert Moses era is going to look like for this city. And that's why I'm the one who said, why don't we scale back these superhighways? You know my plan for the BQE. We don't have to replace one superhighway with another. I offered a specific agenda about how to deck the BQE, create only truck lanes, more cars underground in the tunnels. This is all things that I've worked on. But let's not stop there. Let's look at the Bronx, the Cross Bronx Expressway, the Bruckner Express. These are all superhighways that polluted neighborhoods and also divided communities. I want to take a fresh look and offer the biggest, boldest environmental plan that the city's ever seen, because this is the time to do it. This is the time to reimagine our city in the post-COVID era. You know, LCV was right many years ago. It's called 1% for parks. And we should be investing in all of our communities. There are parks that are big and beautiful, and there's a whole lot of private funding attached to it. But as we open up our streets and make open streets permanent, let's build 200 playgrounds in the next 5 years for our kids. That's called equity for children who don't have the park advantages. Let's take 1% of the city budget so that we upkeep our parks, that we accelerate capital projects. You know, as controller, I've done the data dump and I've shown that these capital projects take too long. And when they're finally completed, we literally miss a whole generation of kids. So part of the new city is to create equity, open space, public space, looking at different ways. I've been in Jackson Heights. I've seen when you close 34th Street and the baby carriages come out and the kids come out and it's safe and parents feel good. And then you can walk to the next park. And in the Stringer administration, you're going to be walking to a new playground and you're going to be walking into open space. And that is the city. They've done it in Paris. They've done it in Copenhagen. They've done it in Barcelona. Come on, New York. We need a mayor who understands how to govern, a mayoralty that is not about training wheels, but actually understanding how to do the work, building the coalition, investing the budget. I do not understand this administration. I know I'm being recorded, but how do you leave the trash strewn over the streets in the middle of a pandemic? I'm not kidding you. I've seen rats walking upright. They say to me, "Hello, Mr. Controller, how are you?" I mean, this is New York City in 2021. This is not the 1970s. And I lived through the dirty streets and the graffiti and the lack of quality of life. So let's get real about this. One, pick up the garbage, but more importantly, stop using garbage bags. One of those parking spaces we talked about, we could put a dumpster right there. That's a healthy way of disposing garbage. That's an idea. The other thing we have to do is let's start composting for real. They've gutted the composting plan. We only have 1% composting in a city that it should be scaled up to lead the nation. Why aren't we thinking strategically about investing in the kind of separation of bottles and paper and goods and recycling? We haven't had a new idea in approaching this in the city in the last 40 years. Time to do that. We got to get away from this time-honored tradition of city government, which I've seen firsthand as a kid who grew up uptown in Washington Heights. The mentality of, well, just put it uptown has to stop, because for too long we put dirty bus depot stations uptown in Harlem and Washington Heights. We spent too much time building peaker plants in Astoria and other communities where the middle class and working poor live. And we have to recognize that as we create a cleaner environment in the city, we also have to make sure that we no longer burden our communities. When COVID hit, one of the things we learned very quickly was it was the great discriminator. It went to the communities that had the most pre-existing health conditions. And there is a correlation between environmental racism and high rates of asthma, type 2 diabetes, creating weaker immune systems. And rather than deal with that through the lens of health disparities and solving these problems, we basically managed the health disparities without solving them, and we continue to ignore the health warnings of doctors and advocates and communities. I remember when I was borough president, I started an initiative called Go Green East Harlem. I did it because there were so many high rates of asthma. And we went to the community and we said, what do you want? And they said, well, we want healthy foods. We want healthy bodegas. We want fresh produce. We want our kids to be tested for asthma. And when we started to implement some of those programs, you could see there was a correlation between healthy communities and grassroots investment in programs. We haven't been doing that in the last 8 years. The next mayor has to step up and work with communities to get this done. I'll tell you what I've done as controller. You know, we've done the investigations. You know, it makes no sense to me that you would identify a child with lead in one building, but you wouldn't then go in and test every child in the building. I don't think we fully appreciate that when a kid gets lead poisoning, this could be something that stays with the child for the rest of their lives. And I do think that when we've looked at this in NYCHA, we've also found many other agencies that should be working together. We find those agencies silos. So I've done the investigations, I've done the audits, I've seen firsthand the devastation of what happens to kids in NYCHA who become victims of government's ineptitude and lack of coordination. And as a father of two little boys, a 9-year-old and 7-year-old, it's something I worry about a lot as a parent, but every parent needs to feel the government is watching out for the children. Well, I think when you talk about a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure, it's going to require retrofitting our buildings. 73% of our buildings, uh, I mean, I'm sorry, our buildings, our unhealthy buildings produce 73% of all emissions in the city. So we have to implement Local Law 97. We have to retrofit those buildings. We have to recognize that we have 28% of our emissions are also due to cars. So when you put it all together, we're going to have to invest in a green infrastructure that actually does the work of cleaning up those buildings and those streets. And that is the whole green economy for working people. And to get there, we need to do the kind of workforce development to train the next generation. We do not even need to produce 4-year college degrees or 2-year degrees. We can invest in micro-credentialing by making 2-year CUNY free and create a micro-credentialing college plan that can get young people into the workforce, can get them to use their brains and their hands and help the environment. As I mentioned, let's face it, this city went through an industrial revolution. We transferred to a service sector economy. The next multi-billion-dollar, $30 billion economy over the next 10 years is the green economy. And we have to make sure that green economy works in all of our communities for all of our children, and that is what I'm going to focus on as mayor. As a kid growing up uptown in Washington Heights, Fort Tryon Park was just where we went, where we played, and I appreciate it now as a father, as I move around the different parks in the city with my own kids. It brings back just a lot of memories. Since the A train when I was growing up was a lifeline, but now it's still the number 1 and the 2 train, and I've been riding the rail since I was a little kid in New York. Our big adventures would go from Washington Heights downtown, but we also mostly went on the bus to Fordham Road, and that was our world. And transit and bikes, and this opened up the way we saw New York City. A reusable water bottle, mostly though, until now. I've been Zooming with a regular glass of water. Now I'm going to make a just transition into the street safely, so I will bring all that I need to showcase my healthy agenda. No, but I recycle like a fiend. Just today, before I met you, I did the separates. I was a biking kid growing up, and now I mostly chase my kids' bikes.